Today we are joined off the bat by UCD Students' Union Sabbatical officers Cian, Casey and Lexi Kilmartin. Guys, thanks a million for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem at all. I'll just do a quick mic adjustment there, live radio for you. So, guys, obviously, Cian, you're a graduate officer and Lexi, you're education officer, and I want to have you on to talk about academic council. Now, this is obviously something that might go over the heads of some students. What exactly is academic council?
Well, academic council, I suppose the best way of describing it is similar to union council or student councils that you might have experienced in school, except it has 23 student members and the rest of its members are made up by faculty. So mostly heads of schools, deans, various senior faculty members. So it's a decision-making body in the university.
Okay, interesting. And how regular does academic council happen? Is this something that's, bi-weekly, monthly, or is it a bit longer than that?
No, it happens once a semester.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So therefore, the issues that may be, discussed at academic council are very, very relevant and important, but seen as only, twice an academic year.
Yeah, so usually the way things will work is things will go to a lot of subcommittees. So there's probably about 15 to 20 subcommittees off academic council. And decisions are made there for recommendation to academic council. And then things are typically voted and decided on at the twice-a-year meetings. Okay,
interesting. And academic council for this semester happened last week, and there was a number of issues discussed at academic council. I know it's obviously last week, and there was a couple of issues more prevalent than others, but can you pinpoint maybe some of the main issues for some students that might not have been there or seen the minutes arising from it?
Well, I suppose the biggest issue last week for academic council would have been relating to students would have been graduation ceremonies. Mm-hmm. Apart from that, a lot of other issues would relate to staff promotions, a few heads of school appointments, new subjects being introduced, things like that. Nothing hugely relevant necessarily to the day-to-day life of students.
Yeah, there were just general reports from the subcommittees that have just been approved. So
okay. That's interesting. Obviously, I sat in it now. I'm obviously talking from a neutral point here on the radio, but some of the main issues that I managed to pick up was obviously the fitness to study policy, which is something that's being brought in, which I think is interesting, and it obviously talks about the capacity of a student and taking in kind of the mental element as opposed to the physical sickness. Is that something that we're going to see implemented in the next year, or is it something further from that? Because I remember, in the meeting there were talks about it going to different boards, like you were saying. Is this something that we're going to see soon, or do you have any idea what's going to happen?
Well, I suppose I could speak on that. I sit on the working group for the fitness to study policy.
Brilliant.
Which is kind of a subgroup of a subcommittee. So the fitness to study policy probably won't be introduced until I'd say 2018 at the earliest. It's in its early development stage at the moment. At the moment we're framing what it should look like. So there's been discussions around it encapsulating issues of mental health, but also encapsulating issues of, say, chronic illnesses, of things like narcolepsy, that might affect your ability to reach your potential in university.
Sure.
It's something that if anybody has ideas or thoughts on what it should encapsulate, they should definitely get in contact with myself or Cian, because we're hoping to put together a kind of students' union committee on the fitness to study policy, so that way people can share their views and opinions on it.
Mm-hmm. Another issue then arising out of academic council was it's something not too relevant to the students, and I probably won't touch on it too much, but I just thought I would mention it was I'm trying to find the word for the relevance of tenure to promotions within professors, faculties and whatever, and that was obviously that was removed after or there's a proposal to remove it. And I think most of the staff and the students, even though it didn't really affect students, were in favour of that. But speaking of in favour, the big issue, and Lexi, you touched on it, was the graduation ceremonies. And Cian, as graduate officer, obviously you're looking over the lots of postgraduate students in UCD, but the graduation ceremony is a huge part of your job. So explain what exactly was discussed and what they want to change about the graduation ceremony.
Yes, so there's a new graduation policy. Well, I won't say policy, but it's a new document that President Deeks set up a UMT working committee on this. And I'm open to correction here, but as far as I'm aware, there was no student consultation in this. And this working group has set out a huge amount of recommendations to change the graduation ceremony of UCD. Some of the main aspects of this that we're taking from it is that they're removing Latin from the graduation ceremony, which myself personally I am upset about, but other students I understand from out there it doesn't really make much of a difference to them. Other things that are happening is that they're changing the parchment, the degree that you get, and they're removing the Latin from it as well. To give it from what I believe, and I only discovered at the meeting that President Deeks said there might be an option to choose your degree in either Latin, Irish or English. This is somewhat of a benefit. As far as I'm aware, it sounded like they were trying to get the €50 translation fee taken away, but I am unsure with that, so I have to follow up on them on some of these questions. They want to increase, they're increasing the English element to this due to the fact that President Deeks believes it increases global engagement. Mm-hmm. However, it was noted by a senior head of staff that although the Latin makes a very important part of this due to being such a high class of status for academics, that they found it very interesting that Irish was to be increased. But we are very happy to have Irish increased in it. But
Definitely.
Of course,
it's the fact that he believed his excuse for removing Latin was students don't understand it. Mm-hmm. Yet we have a huge international population here, and there was noted that they were okay with Irish, that they'd understand Irish.
Surely, Irish is less of a global language than Latin, I would imagine, so if they were to try and, play up that aspect of it, that they would maybe remove the Irish as opposed to Latin, which is obviously something that we wouldn't take too kindly. Obviously, Lexi, as an education officer, there are lots of students studying here in UCD, and Latin is an element of their course. Now, I know the head of the School of Medicine got up and spoke a little bit about that. I know one of my business and law reps spoke about some of the principles in law still being in Latin. Do you think that, the fact that Latin does have a part in a lot of people's education here in UCD, that should directly correlate with the graduation ceremony?
Well, I think it's important to recognise, Johnny, that Latin remains to be the academic language. It has been for many, many centuries, and it continues to be one of the core languages that a lot of academic concepts come from. So you've got everything from law, as you mentioned, to medicine. Naming of plants and animals are more often than not done in Latin. So that's a very important aspect, I think, of this whole discussion. But I think what's most important is a lot of people have maybe gotten the wrong end of the stick from why we were upset at the decision made at Academic Council. It's less an issue of whether or not Latin should be included in the ceremony. That's overall not the biggest issue for us. What the biggest issue for us was, and why we've become so upset at what happened at Academic Council, was a vote was asked for 3 times on the issue, given that not a single person spoke for removing Latin from the ceremony, and many people spoke against it. And it was declined by President Deeks 3 times in the space of one meeting, which we found very problematic.
And this item was under, if I'm not mistaken, discussions and decisions,
yeah.
I think. And, we did discuss it at length. And as you said, Lexi, a lot of people spoke against the concept. but there was no real decision made arising out of that. And what people were a little bit confused about was whether, if we were to make a decision, was to be binding. And I think it's fair to say that we just wanted to have a vote. You have the deans of each school, you have the top professors, you have, the students' union, and a good proportion of the student body in terms of class reps on council, which I think would be quite a fair representation of the college overall. So if we were to have a vote there, I think that would be quite, an important recommendation to the implementation board if we were allowed to vote. But like you said, Lexi, we weren't even allowed to vote. So
well, it's very worrying that there was about roughly 9 topics in this part of the academic council. All of them were asked for approval, bar this, even though formally been asked 3 times, and his only response was this was a consultation, which everyone got very upset about. To later research by myself and Lexi is that President Deeks has actually broke a term of reference. I think it's Article 3.6 of the terms of reference, where if a vote is called, he has to, simplifying it, if a vote is called, he has to have a vote, which is very upsetting for us. I have been quoted on this before, but I personally, myself, believe it is an abuse of power. Yeah.
Well, it diminishes, I guess, the voice of people sitting on it, and it goes against the whole idea of having an academic council in the first place. Yeah,
I think it's important as well, Johnny, to recognise where academic council is in the kind of governance structure of UCD. So the way it's structured is at the very top rank you have governing authority, of which there are 4 student seats on that. Underneath that, it kind of splits into 2 branches to simplify it. One branch is the University Management Team, UMT, which consists of mostly deans or college principals, and the kind of top-ranking people. So you'd have, like, say, Mark Rogers, who's the registrar, and you'd have the likes of Barbara Dooley, who's the Dean of Graduate Studies, and Professor Deek sitting on that. And then on the other kind of branch, you have Academic Council. So Academic Council is supposed to be one of the main decision-making bodies in the university. And I think it's very upsetting that President Deeks was not willing to take a vote and take into account the feedback of his senior staff members and the students of the university that he's managing. Personally, I thought it was very bad form, and it undermines the purpose and integrity of Academic Council. And if it continues to be done, I think it's a really serious issue.
Yeah. Well, guys, thanks a million for coming on today. I know it's leading up to exams, and obviously both of you will have a big part in helping students, whether it be with timetables or fitness to study and lots of other issues. So could you just maybe give your contact details, officers, some of that? When can people get in contact with you?
So the best way, I suppose, to get in contact with either of us would be primarily through email. So my email is education@ucdsu.ie.
And mine's graduate@ucdsu.ie.
Usually, though, if you want to drop down to our offices, we're just in the old student centre. We're generally both there before 11 o'clock in the morning and after about 2 in the afternoon. Otherwise, we might be out at meetings, but we have notice boards on our doors saying when we'll be there and when we won't. So.
And if not, we will be down at the examination hall. So if any questions coming up to in your exams, if you're stressed, worried about anything, come up to us. We'll be staffed there every day. So.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks a million, guys. And look, coming up to the exams, we might have you back on just to kind of discuss some of the avenues available to people that are maybe a little bit stressed or so on forth. So thanks a million. Okay, so we're going to go to a song on the issue of academic council and obviously President Deeks and the general unhappiness of academic council. We're going to play a song by James Brown because I think we can all agree, again my words tied, that his actions definitely accounted to that of a funky president. This is James Brown with Funky President. We'll be back after this.
Funky down. Nasty.